all and wish you all Ramadan Mubarak.
Thank you very much, and the same to you.
We have a special guest today, Mr. Tony Jashanmal, Executive Director of the Jashanmal Group. The Jashanmal Group is a household name, not just in Dubai, but across the Gulf region. In fact, it was Tony's grandfather, the Rao Sahib, who started the group, the first Jashanmal store in Basra, in Iraq, in what is now Iraq. And the British then, this was in 1918, during the First World War, the big war, as they call it, the Great War. And it was the British that encouraged Rao Sahib to set up other stores, starting with Kuwait, and now they are in every part of the Gulf region. Tony, welcome, and thank you for accepting to be part of this webinar. So let me start with, let me cut out a bit of the history, because I know you're a bit allergic to history. Let me cut it out and come straight to the point when you joined the business. You were studying for a PhD in Germany, and then your father died, unfortunately. Tell us from there, because under your leadership that Jashanmal Group moved from just pure retail front-end stores to distribution business. So tell us a little bit about those days, then the strategy and how you diversified the business so that you de-risked it, you made it a more profitable, a better, well-known brand, high-end brands, etc. So tell us a little bit about those, Tony.
First of all, Suresh, thank you very much for having me here. You say I am allergic to history. I'm not really, but one can get carried away too much. But you were right in saying that my grandfather came over at the end of the First World War and to the area because the 5 countries were formed, which used to be part of the Ottoman Empire. So we're talking about Iraq, Jordan, Palestine, Lebanon, and Syria. 3 of them came under the British rule, and 2 of them under French administration. From those under the British administration, which was Iraq, Jordan, and Palestine, many of them, but most of all Iraq, came under the administration from New Delhi. Don't forget, that was the time it was still British India, and all these areas came under the protection and administration of British India. This is how the first development started in Iraq, and because the development started also a lot from India, many people like my grandfather went out to see what was happening. And my grandfather then decided to set up his business in Iraq, in Basra, because that was the only port where the ships were and all the development was coming through. So this is the background. And he ran a good retail business dealing with mainly the British who were coming there to establish the new state of Iraq. And so he ended up dealing basically in Western, mainly British goods. Now, in around the early 30s, when oil demand went up all around the world, and oil was found in Kuwait, it was the British political agent, or what we might call the ambassador today, who asked my grandfather at that time to expand into Kuwait and set up the first department store in that new desert country. Now that also was successful for the people mainly coming from, for the oil industry from the UK and the United States, and we did well. And that eventually became the blueprint for the expansion of our business, mainly putting up the first retail stores with selling bigger range of European, British goods, which were required by the families, British, American, and other foreigners who were coming in for the new oil industry. Now, you're right, in between, even before my time, we had family members running the business, and till today, the business is basically a family business, and most of the family members, or actually the descendants of my grandfather, are still shareholders in the business together. We're a family who has stayed together, and this has been, at least in our feeling, one of the nicest things about the whole business, to be able to stay together. This is naturally a problem in many of the countries all around the world, how to carry it to the second and third generations. But we'll come back to that later. The business in all these countries expanded very fast as the development with the oil, with the advent of oil and the worldwide demand for oil went up, and the whole Gulf started developing. We expanded from Kuwait into Bahrain in 1935, to Dubai in 1955, and then to Abu Dhabi in 1964, and Oman, and then Qatar a little later. The business was basically always first, when the countries were small, the businesses were just one retail store everywhere. As the countries grew at such a pace, many other stores opened, and their main interest was still just to sell, but many of the companies were too small to import things. So this is how they wanted to also sell in different parts of every city. They wanted to sell the goods that we were importing. This naturally made us, with time, to become distributors, agents of those different companies, then their distributors, and therefore, even in many cases, like the whole appliances business that we have, it is usually followed up by the service industry of the installations and of the repairs and so on and so forth. So many of them are downstream businesses. So all those services also develop along with the business. Now, as you know, Kuwait developed very fast into the 70s and then leveled off. And then, of course, there was a crisis of the 90s of the Iraqi invasion. Bahrain started in 35 and developed. Bahrain used to be the center of the Gulf at that time. And later on, the United Arab Emirates also took on the development. Each one of these countries has had a fast development at some time, and these towns grew very fast, and business was very good, both the retail and the distribution business and all the services which were necessary for that. So that's basically the thing. I have to say, I joined in 1972, but before that, between 1911 to 1948, my grandfather was involved. After that, it was his two eldest sons, which was my father and Mr. Atmaram in Bahrain. And then 1955, my uncle Hero joined and ran Dubai, and Mohan, my only still living uncle, is still in Abu Dhabi and known to many people here in the Gulf. So that's the background basically of the business. So it has grown on the sides of retail, distribution, and services, which are all involved with carrying out these two businesses. It has grown healthily. We've had good, strong principles which were established by my grandfather, and which were basically to always deal in good quality, deal with fair pricing, and deal with good servicing, and never miss out on paying your employees, and never miss out on paying your suppliers. So that's the background of the businesses, plus the individual businesses for everybody was individual addition was that we are a part of society, and therefore you have to also work and spend time, not only money, but spend time and effort in doing social services. Social services he emphasized mainly in two, and that was to help keep the mind and the body fit for people. So that there had to be very active involvement in two things. One was education, and the other thing was sport. And so we have, and all our family members have, since the early days, always been involved in setting up and helping set up the businesses and the schools. The first Indian schools in most places were set up, or our family members were very much involved in setting them up, getting the land from the ruling family, etc., and so forth, and also always active in some type of sports. And I am very active still in golf, and have been involved in cricket. I have lived most of my life in Kuwait, with long periods in Bahrain, and since now over 10 years, been very much involved in the UAE, based basically in Dubai, because we have consolidated our business, and it is presently headquartered as a group business in Dubai. Now that's the whole background of our family and my background.
Tell me, Tony, was it a conscious decision or opportunistic that you went from retail to distribution to a number of activities across the group? Was that a strategy, or was it because these economies were booming, that there were so many opportunities, you pursued them, and then you left some of them if they were not effective?
Well, first it was, I think, consequential, because in each of those countries where we are, the first development was retail, but the development of those countries in the first stages already, with the advent of oil, was quite rapid. It being rapid, the cities, the main city of every country, expanded at a very quick pace, and the towns all expanded to a very fast. It wasn't just a natural expansion of the people who were there locally and their births and so on. No, because of the fast development, it was not only the indigenous and the local people who were living there and expanding their business, their families, but so many foreigners were also needed to come and be employed, and in many cases also own businesses and services to help develop the countries very fast. So the development was exponential, not a natural, just linear or even light exponential, but really strong exponential growth. Now, because of that, it became consequential, because it would have been difficult for anybody to open up as many stores as were needed. And therefore, and other people wanted to do businesses in different parts, so they found it easier, and we eventually started finding it easier to supply it by distribution. There was a demand for our products, but we had opened a few stores in each place, but the towns expanded very fast. So it was, if you can call it in that way, quite consequential. Of course, afterwards, then you see the different opportunities, and eventually it became that there was an equal, if not then additional emphasis on developing it strategically.
Now, you mentioned, the importance of social services. In fact, on next Sunday, we are having a similar webinar, but a panel session on community social responsibility. It's very important. Just as companies have corporate social responsibility, non-profit organizations like IBPC should have community social responsibility. For the last few years, we've been doing this. But we'll come to that a little bit later. You have, you're about 70 years old, older to
more
me.
than that.
Older to me by a few years. We've all seen different economic cycles, different crises in the Gulf region. I've been here 40 years. You've been here much longer. How do you see the impact of COVID-19, if we sort of narrow it down to current business insights, the impact of COVID-19, especially retail seems to be like travel, tourism, hospitality, bearing the brunt of, this lockdown. So how do you see the impact, and what do you see are the ways in which it should be dealt with?
Well, it will certainly have new type of developments. And there are a couple of things which will be affected. First of all, many of the countries which we operate in are basically, as I would even call it, amply supplied with product and services. In that businesses therefore have become very competitive, and any disruption like this, where because of lockdowns, because of in case of places like the UAE, lack of tourism and lack of enthusiasm also to spend money, because one is more worried about the virus rather than about one's good looks. And therefore, that in itself has affected the business tremendously, especially because the lockdowns, even the stores had to, all the shops have been closed, except for the essentials. But there's been therefore a very big drop in demand, whereas most of the expenses have carried on. That is, if the companies haven't fired too many of their staff. In some cases, they had no choice, but in other cases where businesses will redevelop again, that you try to keep good and loyal staff as long as you can, because everybody has a breaking point. Some people can hold on longer than others. So there will be a shrinkage of the number of stores. There will be a shrinkage because of the level of business. It'll be a long time since still I think that the tourism levels will meet their original amounts, and especially as people will be worried first because of the virus itself to travel again, and also others because of getting back into the habit of traveling far and wide for their holidays. So I think the retail will be affected just in general. The second thing, of course, is that the online businesses were anyway developing a little fast, developing in all the countries. And a situation like the one that we are presently in or going through has certainly increased the demand for goods being delivered home. That means safely without people having to go out, and so on and so forth. And because of also most of the stores being closed. Now, a period like this will, of course, accelerate that because a lot of people will get into the habit. We've seen in the online business that during this period, that the biggest consumers were the biggest target customer for most people, for most stores, which is the people between the ages of 30 and 50. And that was a very big segment which ordered and got their deliveries without having to go to the stores. So this will accelerate that too, which will be another hit to normal brick and mortar retail. So these are the things which will certainly happen as a result of this. There will be a big structural change in the outlook and in the scene of retailing.
And what changes do you think businesses should do? Because Dubai in particular, we have a number of retail segments. Some of them are doing well, like groceries, pharmacies, exceptionally well during these times. Some are obviously affected, especially high-end products or stores that are catering and shopping malls and the like. So obviously there can't be a one-size-fits-all strategy, but are there any ideas that you would suggest? I mean, you mentioned about online retail activities. More and more businesses are taking to that, but not every business can do that.
Not every business can do that, but there are other people who will take that up. So I'm sure there will be people who will be shifting their profession from to whatever extent they can from I don't think, I mean, eventually the whole demand will, from the people who live here, will not eventually decrease by tremendous. It will slowly pick up, but it will eventually come back. Life is normal. If people earn their money, they are going to spend. The idea of earning money is to live a better life. And so you keep yourself updated and you'll keep yourself buying new products. And that's natural. So businesses will come back, but in what form? So it will be, many of the people might be the same, but they will have to readjust to the circumstances of the business. And like I said, also here we depend a lot on the tourists. The tourists will eventually come back. Dubai has created a very, very ideal environment for people to come to travel to. The services are very good. Security is excellent, and it's a wonderful place. Or most of the Gulf are wonderful places to come and visit and shop, as many people will come again, whether it's from neighboring countries or like we depended also a lot on the Chinese clients, and I'm sure many of them will come back. But as I said, the people will have to adjust to a different way and a different way of living. And when I say the business will be down, I think the brick and mortar will not expand as much as people had even wanted, with so many new complexes and department stores still coming up. They might also get business, but then there will be more closings in the ones which used to be there before. So what there will be is there will be both structural and physical changes, which were there, which were going to be slowly there. I mean, which we've seen happening in the United States, where so much of brick and mortar retail has been decreasing. But this situation has speeded it up and will speed it up. So, and initial stages, it'll be also total businesses will be slow. And it will also depend on the response also of landlords, of malls, etc. Now, coming back to that, I mean, for the opening of businesses, people need to plan. Now, in the UAE and in Dubai especially, the big retail or the mall developers and owners have been very slow in really being able to give an answer to their tenants as to how much rent they are going to be charging or not charging during the time of closure. What are the rents going to be in the time of the first slow period after opening? What is going to be the rent afterwards when demand is not the same? So there are other countries like as we are in different countries, in Kuwait, for instance, the major malls have said right away last month already that they were 3 months rent free, and some other adjustments and arrangements for the coming future. Now, the circumstances are not the same or going to be the same in every country. They will be different in different countries. So that would certainly affect. And I think uncertainty on many of those things, especially the rents, which create such a large part of a company's expense, especially a retailer's expense. And especially those uncertainty over that might even make more people think twice about opening their businesses, and certainly many others very wary of how much, or they might be further cautious and release their staff, etc. Because eventually, it's money, cash, expenses, which will be a major factor in deciding how people develop their businesses even afterwards.
Yeah. Moving on to an important point that you mentioned, and I would like you to elaborate a little bit more. You're one of the few businesses which have survived and flourished over 4 generations. There is a study which said that businesses 70% don't as they go 4th and 5th. So what are the learnings, or what are the key messages? Many of our members and their sons are grooming. Some of their sons and daughters may not necessarily have interest in the business. Just like you were studying for PhD and you wanted to join the United Nations when you were in Germany. And it was very reluctant. You were a very reluctant debutante, as they say, into business. You were forced into it because your father died. So what advice would you like to share to family businesses that are transitioning so many generations?
Well, the most important thing always seems to be setting out the right form of governance, which is agreed by all, By that I mean it should be clear as to who is going to be in what position, because that is usually that is one of the main points in disputes or in even setting the basis for a future. The second thing is, which is always a big problem and which comes up very much in families, is to what level is who in the family allowed to spend how much. Now, this is where a very big problem entails very, very often. Jealousies build up when somebody has sort of got something more than the other. Now, this is if the businesses are not regulated according to some type of formula. I will just give an example of our business, it was in 1973, just after I had joined the business, or we would say the third generation joined the business. And at that time, that's just straight soon after my father had died. Until that time, but my grandfather's time and my father's time, it was run more on a patriarchal system, where the eldest was the head of the family, and he made the rules. Now, after my father died, his next brother, Mr. Atmaram, felt that it might be time to visit this type of potential problem of a growing family, and especially the growing family entering the business. So I remember that time in '73 that we all met for a 2-day gathering of family members, and we thrashed this particular subject. In those days, unfortunately, in the Gulf, we didn't have too many consultants and other help around to really guide us too much on this. But the formula we had come out to was that instead of making it just be a loose family company, it was decided that the brothers or the sons of my grandfather would basically, the business would be split equally between them. And that became their official shareholding in the company. So we had amongst ourselves a sort of a holding company, which had this understanding. Now, the children of these families would be the inheritors of those shares. So it was not that any group of those families would increase their share by a number of people or a number of families. So it was equally divided like that. But that was as to the ownership of the thing. The second thing that was done was as to the running of the company. It was thereafter decided that we would see ourselves as a group, although we were in different countries, and before that the different countries were run individually by different brothers. But now it would be formalized that all the company was to be seen as one group together, which would be run by one CEO. And we made it a rule that the CEO would be a professional, and he would be not one of the family. So the management or the running of the company was left to that. Family, the senior family members were the board of the company. They gave the policies, they were the shareholders, but they did not basically run the company. Now, that system which was formed at that time has sustained itself till today. So the whole family, now, although then most of the brothers who were there as shareholders to start with, most of them have passed away. Their children are inheritors of their shares and paid dividends accordingly, as stipulated by each of those brothers eventually, originally. It is stipulated in their wills and done accordingly. So this is how the ownership has been specified, and also the governance. As I said, the governance is basically professionals who come into the business. This way, one does not expect family members to work in the company. And many of them will not decide to work in the company, because for family members that work in the company, we have strict rules, meaning that they should, if they are interested in the company, that they can work in the company, that they will work and we will help them see different parts of the company, etc. But we encourage them to do either their own businesses for some time in between, and or to get jobs outside the company so as to get experience in the outside our family business. Now, this happens naturally because most people do not want to go and do not feel themselves, usually after their good educations and maybe some experience also internationally, they don't really feel like toiling through a company all the way up and down. Anyway, so most of the family members who are not, who are the former descendants, have got their different businesses or their different professions. And many, of course, like you have artists in the family, and you have others in the family with other interests who would be misfits and unhappy if they had to be part of the company. They are still part of the shareholding, and most of them, because of the family dividends over several years, etc., most of them have enough money to be able to even start their own if they wish. So that's the case. The most able people from the children are then the candidates to be on the board whenever the older ones retire. So that's just an example, but it is important to set something like this up so as to avoid future interfamily problems.
Issues. I appreciate. Yeah.
Sorry.
Tony, you referred to social surveys. I know you're also a football fan, English Premier League, Tottenham Spurs. You're a golfer. So how do you achieve what they call work-life balance? What advice would you give to our businessmen, professionals in IBPC in terms of achieving work-life balance? You've done it well, so that even when you have disruptions or interruptions like you have because of COVID-19, you don't sink or swim. You swim along rather than sink in the process. So you're diversified both in your personal lives and in your business, in your businesses. What advice?
Yeah, I think if you do have a balance in life, and if you have worked out some balances in life on your uh, social responsibility that you create for yourself, on your health and sport and whatever with it, um, I think it just teaches you straight away that there is a lot a lot of things that for yourself that have to be done in life, and there are, and you can try and excel in every different type in different types of situations. I think people who do manage to do different things and don't have to excel but enjoy them at the same time, I think they've placed themselves better in a whole general situation of good and of bad times. Um, I have been, as you know, I was in Kuwait with my family during the Iraqi invasion, and was there for several months. And during that time, you have to do what you think is right, help, do whatever is there, and at the same time, believe that when anything and everything is over, that you should have the confidence that I will carry on with my life in whatever the new circumstances are. There will be work, you get down on your knees and start again. And there will be some way of keeping up keeping your health going, and somewhere where you can carry on your social responsibilities too. You will have a full life again, and you just have to you have to think positively. I am, I'm, like we all in these days now, we're enjoying our family more, um, keeping up to trying to be fit. I tried to do, although it's in the garage of the building, I tried to do by 10 kilometers of walking a day. And you have to put yourself, you have to psychologically strengthen yourself to say, there's a life after this too. So let's keep in shape, let's keep in good spirit, and let's keep in good relations. You just got to be strict with yourself.
Absolutely, absolutely. We'll move on to the questions from members, Tony. First question is from Mr. J.B. Pamnani. In fact, he's got two questions. Let me start with the first one. He says, what are your views on the support of banks during COVID-19 in terms of facility repayment and when business cash flow is affected?
Well, we're all looking forward to saying that we get whatever is the maximum help that you can get. It's going to be different in different countries. It's going to be at different timings in different countries. It's also the situation that every country is in. I think there is the intention to help, but I think there are big problems for each country, and some countries will have bigger problems than others, like for instance the UAE or other countries in the Gulf, where you have so many foreigners, where you have to repatriate so many, where you have to look after their health. And some of those become bigger than was expected. So there will be some adjustments, etc. The intention of the government, because there is no government wants to see all the businesses fall and not be able to survive. So they will find a way. Sometimes it might be later, and therefore they will convince the people. They will find ways of adjusting. I've been through that in Kuwait, and the government helped out tremendously in not canceling our loans which we had from the bank. We had to eventually pay those, but ways were given as to how to slowly pay them off and pay them off leniently, and so on and so forth. Things will be done, but there will be, I'm sure it won't be that easy. Banks have had the money, and one has to see really effectively. And I think if there are organizations, if there are any, they should make the effort, because don't forget, in life it just so happens that way, that the biggest and the strongest get their way fastest. So we'll have to, with whatever resources we have, with whatever groupings we have, we'll have to make our pitch stronger. And but I'm sure that the governments will come forward and help, because no government in these areas or anywhere want to see businesses in such a state that recovery for the country and for employment and for importing and for giving services, that they become so difficult for the people to manage that it breaks down the whole structure of the economy. So we've got to keep that in mind, and I'm sure the governments will see where the biggest difficulties lie. It's not an easy solution, and it's not an easy thing to foresee for everybody as to where the most important money must go in first.
Let me ask the second question. Your thoughts on re-export trading, especially from African region. Again, Mr. J.B. Pamnani.
You mean
think they'll start coming back to Dubai?
Yes. I think, we don't know what the whole effect is going to be on the African countries yet. We don't know if they've hit even the early part of the virus, or if they've been in the middle or at the end. And it certainly doesn't look like at the end, but who knows, maybe they'll get away with it softer than other countries did. But maybe their immunity is better than that of the Europeans and the Americans, as we say. But I think whatever happens, I think the next the future of the African countries is still quite bright. These are countries, if you compare them to our countries here, they are not as saturated with all the goods and services like we are here, and they need a lot, and they will need a lot, and their economies are potentially there to grow over the next 10, 15, 20, 100 years. And so I think it is the new frontier, or the great frontier as far as businesses go. I don't know how slow or how long they take, but that's where the demand is the biggest. That's where the growth will be biggest. And I don't see their demand coming down. It might be a little slow in the early stages, like everything else will be. But I think the future for Africa is very, very good. I regret that we've been so busy here that we haven't looked enough into Africa ourselves.
Moving on, Deepak Ahuja has a couple of questions. What's the outlook for Dubai, UAE, and rest of the GCC economies over the next 18 months? And what is your advice for budding entrepreneurs, new entrepreneurs in the present time?
I would basically say there is going to be different shifts. And I think the best thing for everybody is to see and really think about what is going to be the thing for which there will be demand. What type of services, what type of technology, what type of goods, what type of like we said, supply of products, with how much online and how much offline, and things, and work at them at a different level. I mean, the world is operating because of modern technology. The world is operating at a different pace and with different tools. So to really study that, what is potential there, and if you're an entrepreneur, yes, it's a new world, it's a new beginning. There will be quite a bit of structural change in the Gulf, and I think, but I think again we are growing countries still. If it slows down, we find ways of how to increase. Countries were all so much more dependent on oil before, and now they're trying to push on the non-oil sectors, and that will not stop, and that has got a lot to grow. Even the necessity is probably even more today than it was before. So I think it's good, strong thoughts and studies are necessary. Less about following what was there before, but rethinking, reseeing what will be the next, what are the next frontiers, and they are better educated, the young people too, and so I think it's going to be such a change in a way, albeit it'll be slower, but it'll be a new change that I think it is exactly what would just be right for the young entrepreneur.
Gary Wabi wants to know how much online business versus showroom business for Jashanmal's now and in the future.
I don't want to quantify. I would say a small part now, but a big part in the future.
Good answer.
Or a faster growing part in the future.
Yeah.
That is all. I think it's not only for
Jetwani wants to know Jashanmal. I think it's for everybody. Yeah. There is a fair amount of online activity and a lot of innovation happening even in that space in technology terms.
Like I said, even during this period, the highest expense and the fastest and the most purchasing was done by the people of the ages of 30 to 45, actually.
Yes.
The online business is what I'm saying.
Okay.
Because that's become a normal way for more people in that line to be purchasing a great part of their requirements online.
Yeah. Moving on, Hemant Jetwani has a couple of questions. I'll combine them. What's the impact of the pandemic on high-end luxury items, and what policy and strategy changes will be required?
Well, the effect on the high end has been very drastic. First of all, if you take it in fashion, if you take fashion or clothing and shoes included, etc., have been probably the slowest selling items during the virus time, the COVID-19 time. Now, that is normal, that people are not looking for new clothes, or certainly not for the expensive clothes, because they've had less weddings and functions and so on and so forth, and the people are not really in the mood to go out and buy new dresses or shoes or whatever. So the time of these lockdowns and whatnot has been probably the worst for clothing and shoes. Now, will people jump back at it? To a certain extent, yes, because they haven't bought these things. And if they can easily afford, then they will jump back a little bit. But I think it'll still be slow and it'll take a little time, but it'll come back. Although there is a feeling that this time the effect on the human being has been so strong that he might not think too greatly about living as extravagant and as an entertaining life as he used to do before. But I don't think so. I think for some time one might change a few things in one's way of life, but eventually I think many of those things will come back to normal as to what people want and what they naturally enjoy also. But it was a tough period during these days. It was a tough period.
Absolutely.
In that field during these days. Next, anybody?
From James Matthew, if COVID subsides by June, how long will the business take to come back, especially in the UAE, which is depending on the outside world?
Well, I know I'm saying that people will not travel so much soon after it happens. If it subsides end of June, I think many people would first like to go and see some other environment. So, as usual, if in the period of June to September, the businesses are usually the lowest. June half is okay, but that's the time when many people travel and go away. And of course, although people not all of them go away at the same time, it's still that is the lowest period. And I don't think that will in itself get much better in that way. But I think the change will not be as big because on the travel side, I don't think that many people will travel as usual because they will still be careful about where they go and whether and how much of the virus is still around the world in different places. So I think people will be a little more careful and they will stay here. Now, if they stay here, the more people that stay here, of course, they will do some shopping here. And so that will happen. So I don't think personally it'll be a very big change from normal times. In some sectors might be even better because there's people staying here.
I think so. Interesting question from Prabhakar Kesavan. It says you got Emiratis and Gulf nationals in senior positions, partners in your group.
Yes.
What are the pros and cons? Some of your board members are also.
Well, our partners have been partners in different businesses of ours, and they've been. I mean, we've always had very good relationships with our partners. So it's been like any other good partners you might have. If it's up to you to run the right company and run it the right way, then you'll have the local partner is like any other partner. Here are the reasons why the law came out in the old days and from the old days that you had to have a local partner. It was for no other reason as to help at that time. The people who were coming here to do businesses had at that time the money, they had the education, they had the knowledge, etc. when they came. So there it was to avoid a unbalanced situation in the country. Otherwise, the businesses would have all been owned from that time by foreigners. I think they did the right move to help the local people have part of the economy of their own country. Now, our partners are all big and able businessmen on their own side. So if anything, I think there are great advantages with the local partners, and especially if they are chosen as good business associates and form. In our case, some of them are also, they form part of the board, the governing board, and their input is very, very good and very, very helpful. There are angles and connections that your local partner will have, which are not accessible or not easy to everybody.
Next is an interesting question from Rajesh Agarwal. He says, what is your retirement plan?
Pardon,
and what are the expansion plan? Your retirement plan personally.
Yes.
He wants to know.
Well, I don't have retirement plan as such. We will, as we are voted on as board members or not, and so as long as people think that, as the partners feel that anybody is good enough to be on the board, then you will be. And so if they think you're capable enough, that means you are not ready for retirement. Now, as you might have less duties to do, but it doesn't mean that you have to leave, that you work, or that you work to the state or to the level that you're doing today. It is, if you can help, you allow yourself to be as helpful as you can be, but that's a decision usually on behalf of the partners. And I think it's not a necessity. Yes, I think it's a necessity if you are physically unable. And but I don't think. I mean, my working time is, I would say, I work as much as I can, but it is not such. It's not a day job, as they call it. It's more. A lot of it is thinking. A lot of it is consulting. A lot of it is being there when you are needed, rather than have a daily fixed routine. So, and these are also positions which are necessary. The company, as usual, as we said, we have a CEO of the group, and the CEO runs the management of the company. I sit on the board, and I'm basically president of the company, like an executive director between the company, between the board and the CEO. And so, you know, it's not a painful job. It's not a very taxing job for me. So I think I keep relationships. One of the main things that I keep relationships with all our suppliers and the social connection to them. So there are things that one can do, and one can do at whatever age or stage one is, but that is also very much up and in consultation with your partners.
Melvin Cornelio wants to know, who is your role model? What area of operation of business you personally look after?
Oh, they keep on changing every day. You know, you never know who's your real role model. At different times, it was when I was at university, it used to be Karl Marx, but I would say mostly still, and it's a personal thing. Mostly still, it is a person who stands out in social responsibility, meaning a person who gives time and effort also, to enough of effort to the welfare of the needy, the welfare of the poor, the welfare of the poorer countries, and so on and so forth. I think eventually we should, we're all here together, and we should do, the better off we are, the more we should do also to help fellow beings, whether they're in your, whether they are in the country where you live, whether they're in the country that you come from, or whether it is internationally, wherever you can. And I think it is just for people to do business and things, just to be wealthy and just to be rich is something I probably look down on, rather than my role model people are the ones who do care for others and for their community and for their society in which they live.
Naveen Kapoor is remembering Gangu Batra, who, in fact, Gangu used to be on the board of IBPC when it was formed, and way back in 2003, 2002, who has come in his place, and he also wants to know whether the Chinese will come back to the Gulf to buy luxury goods. So two different questions.
I know I'd love to talk about Gangu Batra. Yes, he, like I said, when we got together in 1973, Mr. Gangu Batra joined the family and the business in 1953, when he was 23-year-old or something. Yeah, he must have been 23 at that time. He joined in 1953. He joined in Kuwait. I remember my father interviewing him in Bombay. I was a student in Bombay in those days. And he joined as a senior salesperson. And he was very, very able, and slowly, still in Kuwait. He was in Kuwait from 1953 to 1977 when he shifted to Bahrain. But in 1973, when we eventually formed ourselves as a group, what I was saying before, when we decided that the business will be seen as a group and run by the company, by a CEO. At that time, that was in 1973, we chose Mr. Gangu Batra to be the first CEO of the group. Now he was the first CEO of the group, but he was there from 1973 as the group CEO till early 2000. Now, all the changes and the big consolidation and development of us as a group was actually very much carried out and managed by Mr. Gangu Batra. I was then at that time the managing director and running matters in Kuwait, and Gangu Batra was, for instance, Gangu Batra was my boss. So, and he was a good teacher, and he of course told me that his teacher had been my father. So, but Gangu Batra, we all relate to him, and all the family members have been. He was like, and he with time he developed as to be more a family member than an employee. But he was the first CEO and a very important person in developing our whole business. So we remember him well. He passed away a few years. We're still always in touch with his family. Most of which stays in the US. What was the second question?
Well, the second question is about the Chinese coming to the Gulf to buy luxury items.
Well, I think they will to a great extent, but because I think more Chinese will anyway come to the area here in the new developments, whatever they are. And I hope they will. I think they will, and I certainly hope they will, because they were very good customers of many companies here too. So we're all looking forward to them coming back.
I'll keep this as the last question because I'll skip questions on construction, property, real estate, and online retail, etc., which we have covered or not quite relevant. Last question is clearly this is from Mr. Rajkumar Pancholia.
Yeah.
And he says 2020, now that it has got shifted or likely to be shifted to 2021, it has been accepted by the committee and it's going to the members to vote, BIE. Expo 2021, what will be the situation of what he means is Expo 2020 was supposed to happen in October this year. It has got pushed to next year.
Yes.
How will businesses start preparing? Because Expo 2020 will bring in 20, 30 million visitors and tourists to Dubai. So what kind of preparation should retail businesses do? Well,
there are different ways of looking at it. First of all, the center where the expo is and where the retail businesses are two different areas. So it's not as if the retail, big part of the retail business is in the expo area. So because people, with the expo as it is, the expo is, I've been to several expos, and some of them have been grand, some of them have been less grand. And I'm sure Dubai will be, from the ones I've been to, it's probably going to be the grandest. So it should attract many people, a lot from the area. When I say the area, is from the Arab countries, from India, from the subcontinent, and from maybe Russia also, and maybe many countries nearby. But also several people will come from further. So I think we will have a lot of visitors, but we have to still devise the right methods of them spending more time also in our own retail areas, because even I'm sure in the long term, even in that area with more housing, etc., that a lot more retail business would develop, and that would be convenient. But we are quite far from each other. In many terms, I think an expo helps tremendously, not only the retail business, but it helps the whole country. New developments come in because of the expo and so on and so forth. But so a direct impact on retail is a very difficult thing to say. Personally, I don't think on retail is going to be a very, very big impact. I'm sure it could happen, could be another 15, at best 15% of the business. That's my feeling. But I think we will just learn a lot from it. A lot more new people will come to the country. They will come maybe second, third time when they have and look at the country from different angles, because I'm sure the type of expo that they planned here, most of the people who come here will come mainly for the expo, and if it's going to be as good as it is, it will take up a lot of their time there. I only hope also that the transportation there, otherwise from town, is easy, and if good packages are made by the hotels or by anybody, that that the people can stay much more in the very, very good hotels in town and near our main shopping areas, that would of course help, because in the evenings and in their, they have to have some relaxed time, that the people will stay longer with good packages, and that they will have therefore more time to see the retail business. But I think that is actually very, very important as to the right type of packages being made for the people, that they stay in town, that the transportation is easy, and that they can then spend a little more time in town too.
Tony, this will go on for a very long time because we've got questions coming in even as we speak. But in the interest of time, let me thank you, I think, for the amount of time that you have committed to this conversation. It was rewarding, and it's coming from experience and insights that are valuable, and I really appreciate your being with us. And I'm sure we'll have you taking a more active part in some of our future discussions, policy advocacy measures, and the like. So thank you very much, Tony. I really appreciate. And if this was a physical meeting, there would have been a standing ovation. But we will keep that in the future.
Thank you very much. I'm glad to see that many of the questions came from very close friends. So it's nice to know that they are around and also active at this time of the day. So thank you very much, Suresh, and it was a pleasure. And greetings to all who have attended the webinar, and wish you all the best through all of Ramadan, and wish you good businesses and healthy life, however and whenever we all get over this. So thanks all, and goodbye.
Thank you very much. Thank you.